Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Glennis Waters. I am the Executive Director of Benefits for GIOA, and I will be training today's seminar. I am joined here by Andrew Pinto from Mineral and Cindy Moultrie from the GIOA team. We are scheduled to begin our webinar here at about 3 o'clock. We will wait just for a couple minutes afterwards. Just in case you're wondering where you are, this is the in leave of absence training. A session is going to be recorded. We are in a webinar, so that means you can't unmute yourselves, but feel free to put any questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll be sure to answer those questions as we go throughout today's presentation. So while we give everybody a few minutes to join us, we're going to just start our first poll here. And it has launched. And we'll run this poll until we begin today. So please answer the poll if you have a moment, and we'll begin shortly. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining. For those of you who just entered the room, we are running a quick confidence check for FMLA and leave, and confidence on how you feel about what you know about leave. My name is Glennis Waters. I'm the Executive Director of Benefits for GIOA, and I'll be leading today's discussion. I am joined by Andrew Pinto from Mineral and Cindy Moultrie from the GIOA team. We're going to start officially here in about 2 minutes. We want to give everybody enough time to get into the presentation so we can ensure we have the maximum number of participants in today's session, but we are recording the session. So because we are recording, you are in a listen-only mode and the cameras are disabled so the recording can be clean. But please feel free to use that chat feature at the bottom or the Q&A feature, and Cindy will field any of those questions through as we go through today's presentation. We will begin here in about 1 or 2 minutes just to allow the maximum number of participants to come in. If you do have a moment to take our poll, we would appreciate it. We're going to be doing a few polls throughout the presentation today just to understand where everybody is from a leave management perspective. Thank you so much, and give us about one more minute and we will get started. All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Once again, my name is Glennis Waters. I am the Executive Director of Benefits for GIOA. It is very nice to meet everybody here on the call today. This is our first training on FMLA and leave of absence management. So we are really excited to be having this training with you all today. I also have on the phone with me Andrew Pinto from Mineral and Cindy Moultrie from the GIOA team. We're going to try to manage our cameras off just because we are recording today's session, but we will wave at the end of the presentation just so you know exactly who we are. So for those of you who have done our poll, I'm going to end the poll now. So our first poll was, how comfortable or confident are you with your knowledge on managing employee leave? And it looks like most people are, right at the lower end to the middle. So that's good. We don't have anybody completely unheard of on leave of management absence perspective. But it is a quite complicated discussion. And the reason why we're having today's presentation is to, one, go ahead and set some groundwork up to get people to get their juices going and really thinking about how does this impact me and my people. And two, to give you the framework of where you can go for more information. So those are the two big pieces that we want to accomplish today. When putting together the presentation, this is a vast topic. So please be on the lookout because we'll probably have another training in the near future for a part 2 to today's discussion. All right. So we took our first poll. Great. I'm gonna end that and bear with me because it's my first time using all the polls, so I'm hoping that we get through them all today. So again, welcome to the training. Today we're going to talk about the importance of recognizing what these laws look like. We're going to talk about the purposes, the enforcement, who is accountable for these laws, and how they all work together. So the first thing I want to say is this training was sent out to operators, it was sent out to admins, it was sent out to anybody who was in what we deem a leadership role. So what does that mean for you? That means if you interact with team members in any way, shape, or form, if you are creating schedules and people are reporting to you or you're doing the HR portion, you have accountability and a responsibility in helping make sure that the leave management is done properly. And I say that because it's super important. There are areas of leave that you cannot even imagine that you are accountable for as a person in that position that you are. And it's important to know that so you know what to do when you get faced in that situation. One thing I want everybody to remember while we're going through this training is, one, ask us questions. Please ask questions, give us scenarios, things you faced, and we'll help you work through those because somebody else may have the same question. But two, that it is not always the team member's responsibility to come to you and use legal jargon, to come to you and use specific terms, or even to initially say, I have a need. Sometimes you as the employer, you as the leader, the supervisor, the shift lead, whatever position you have, you are responsible for giving somebody their legal rights. And that is the protection that is afforded to the organization by you being in that role. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to have some examples, and then Andrew's going to show us where on Mineral you can get more resources. He's going to show us where on Mineral you can build your handbook if you don't have that, and where you update your information to ensure that your policies are actually correct. Okay. So that is what we hope to accomplish in today. But again, if we don't get done, we might have to have a part two, but we're going to try our best to get through everything. So first, there's a lot of overlap in laws, okay? There are violations that could be happening, and that you will be responsible for if you don't adhere to the laws. So as we go through this, just keep in mind we will try to weave in for it for you so you don't get lost into what happens, right? But you don't want to accidentally get caught up in lost wages, in somebody's benefits not being appropriately done, because the agencies that govern these laws will come back and they will assess damages if it is reported. Now, it's better to have the practices in place and understand how things work. Okay. So let's talk about the purposes first of a couple of the ones that you may be less familiar with. And then we're going to do another poll and then go into some more information. So the first one is ADA. ADA. If you have not heard of ADA, it's also termed ADAA, right? So this is Americans Who Are Disabled Act. This is the protection for those individuals. This is not a leave of absence. ADA is an accommodation. And so this could look like some time off from work, but it also could look like I'm unable to perform my current duty. So you're going to give me a temporary restriction or accommodation to do something else because I have an undue hardship. This one does work concurrent with FMLA. Most times it comes after the FMLA exhausts, but this particular one is there to prohibit any discrimination against people who may have a disability. So this is a temporary disability. It could be a little bit of a permanent disability. It does depend on what the paperwork says, but that's what this one is for. PWFA. So this is the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act. This is a newer one. Again, this is not a leave of absence. This is an accommodation for individuals who have pregnancy related conditions. So this is giving you the affordability to provide an accommodation where possible to not require this person to go out on a leave of absence. So that is what the PWFA is. So as we start talking about these terms, that's what that one is. It's for pregnancy, okay? FMLA, now this is the one that most of you may be familiar with. Family Medical Leave Act, okay? So this is one of the older policies. This is an actual leave of absence. This is a leave. This is a leave. It is trackable. This is something that is considered a leave. This one provides job protection. Now, you will hear me distinguish between paid and unpaid, okay? FMLA is unpaid. There is no payment to FMLA. If you give your team members paid time off, you can require them to use their paid time off during FMLA. FMLA can run side by side or concurrent with short-term disability if they're eligible and they have short-term disability. But the FMLA itself as a leave is unpaid, okay? So this particular leave is for an employee's own health condition. So if I myself am the team member and I'm sick, it covers me. But it can also cover a family member. And it's specific to what kind of family members. It's a spouse, it's a child, it's a parent. Okay. It is not a grandparent. It is not an aunt and uncle. It is not a sibling. It is not a child over the age of 18. So there are specific rules in play that cover family members. It can also cover extingency for military family members if there's no other relatives, right? So you have a uncle in the army and he's all by himself and you're the only relative. That's an exception for military. But for most intensive purposes, it's spouses, it's children, and parents. Okay. That is all that's covered under FMLA for the actual law for the actual job protection. Okay. So that is what the FMLA is. I'm going to pause before we go into our next poll. Are there any questions at this time in the chat or in the Q&A? Cindy, anything in there?
Glennis, it doesn't look like they're able to add to the chat, but I do have a couple of questions. One person wants you to kind of explain what mineral is, which I think Andrew will do that shortly. And the other question is there a limit on FMLA? This particular person has a team member who has turned in their paperwork for FMLA for a continuing health issue. Can a person call in and miss work as much as they want because they have that paperwork? Um, any
Oh, that's a good
explanations
question.
there?
That's a good question, Cindy. I'm going to ask you to hold that
Okay,
until we get to that section. But
perfect.
no, FMLA is not unlimited. FMLA is not unlimited, and that's why we're having this training. It is not an open book to be out as much as you want. And there are some things that you should have in place, policies that tell your team members, and Andrew's going to talk about where you can go get the policy builders about your rules. And even with those policy builders, you should have these conversations and say, okay, here's FMLA. Do I need to provide something that goes along with that for these extra situations? So we're going to talk about that in a moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the next quiz, the next poll. So let's talk about size requirements. I actually, while we the poll is up, let's see how many people know the answer to these. And Cindy, let me know. Can you see the poll up? Oh, okay, it's up.
Yes, it is. It's
Okay.
up.
So I'm gonna leave it up for another minute while I chat through this. Um, Somebody asked me, am I required to do FMLA? And so that's why we created this poll to see how many people understand what the size requirements are. And the poll is going. We're going to give it another minute or so. Okay. All right. I got 3 more seconds on that. All right, I'm gonna just end that poll. Get your last ones in. Okay, we're gonna end that poll. All right. So FMLA, the size requirement for FMLA is that you have 50 or more employees in a 75-mile radius. So for those of you who have multiple units or stores, if your stores are pretty close together, they're less than 75 miles, that's going to count in your store radius. Okay. For those of you who are less than 50, then FMLA won't apply to you. Okay. But most of you do have 50 or more team members, and this is not full-time team members. I want to be clear. This is not full-time team members. This is going to be your all your team members, whether they're full-time or part-time. Okay. ADA and PWFA both are 15 or more employees. So if you have 15 or more employees, and again, this is not a situation where you're doing a full-time, part-time calculation, it's just 15. then the ADA and PWFA apply to your store. And USERA, military leave, applies to everyone. It doesn't matter how many people you have, you all must abide by the USERA rules. And USERA, for those of you who don't know, which we're assuming that everybody may know about that, that's the military leave of absence. Um, that's when you get deployed. Now, that applies to if you have a National Guardsman or reservist and they get called to duty. So that's what the USERA applies to. Okay. So that means most of us on this phone, we must have some sort of policy in place, some kind of leave policy in place for our team members on FMLA, on ADA or PWFA or USERA. We should have something in place that says this is what happens to you if you have these benefits. So if you don't have that policy, this is something that we definitely need to start working on so people know what happens to them while they're on leave of absence. I'm going to pause there for 1 second. Any questions about the size requirement to abide by FMLA, ADA, or PWFA or USERA?
Glennis, can you let us know if there is a family exception that covers parents-in-law with FMLA?
Not for parent-in-law. FMLA is very strict, and it is strict because it is employers are held to very high standards for FMLA. So your in-laws are not covered for you under FMLA. It's just your parents.
What about an adult child that's disabled?
Very good question, Cindy. If there is an adult child that is disabled, so they're 18 or older and they're disabled, FMLA will provide protection if they're unable to perform, I believe it's 3 daily functions of living. So 3 daily functions of living would be I can't feed myself, I can't bathe myself, I can't clothe myself, I can't move myself. So it's not for your college kids who are functional or if they can perform most of their daily functions of living. It is for those adult children who cannot perform 3 or more daily functions of the 5 of living. Good question, Cindy.
And you
Okay.
mentioned, I'm sorry, you mentioned no grandparents. What about if you are the main caregiver for a grandparent? Are there exceptions there?
So FMLA is specific to what I named,
Okay.
but what I would tell you as employers, this is where we talk about policy, okay? So FMLA talks about what's eligible under FMLA. If you have if you should have a written policy for other leaves if FMLA is declined. Okay. So I'm an employee. I'm taking care of my grandparent. Grandparents are not covered under FMLA. Is there another option for me as you as my employer that I can take? Is there a personal leave? Is there a non-FMLA family member caregiver leave? These are things that you have to decide if you're going to offer them to your team members. But what I would tell you and caution you is they need to be very prescriptive. You should not have an open-ended, vague policy. It should be if you have this need, you can apply for this policy. It covers these people for this length of time. It is unpaid, or you'll be required to use your vacation time for X number of days for this particular policy. You have to be employed for this amount of time to qualify for it. Whatever it is, be very prescriptive for it so it's not vague. Because if it's vague, then you create precedents for yourself and you would have to adhere to it. The reason why these laws are in place is to have consistency and protection for the team member and for you as an owner operator with these laws. If you the reason why I'm telling you to have policies clearly written, because it is very easy if you like Susie, Susie's a good hard worker, Susie needs to take care for her grandparents, and you give Susie time off to do that outside of a policy that's written. But then Jimmy comes along. Jimmy is consistently late. Jimmy is not as hard of a worker, or whatever the situation is. Jimmy needs to take care of Jimmy's grandparents as well, and you don't allow Jimmy to have that time off, then you could possibly have a discrimination issue at hand. But if you have a policy, you can apply the rules of the policy regardless, and then you are being clear, fair, and consistent across the board to all team members. It is very important for everyone to remember when we're talking about leave of absence management, when we're talking about letting people be off and adhering to policies, is not an emotional decision. It's a policy HR practice, and therefore it keeps you compliant and fair and consistent to all team members. So I know I went beyond the question, Cindy, but I wanted to make sure I did that plug.
And if you don't mind, Glennis, I've got a couple of questions about who it covers. Could you just repeat the family members that you mentioned before?
Absolutely. So FMLA covers your parents, so your mother and your father. It covers your children, 18 and younger, so minor children, and your spouse. Okay. So let's talk about eligibility under these plans. So you don't see USERA on here because USERA's eligibility is based on if they're serving in the armed forces and you have to adhere to just let them go. So we don't have that on here. But for ADAA or ADA, the eligibility is someone who is disabled. Now, let me be clear. You are not to see somebody with a cane and they're coming to work and they're wobbly and you all automatically say, "Do you need an ADA?" You cannot do that. This particular accommodation, the person needs to request it, okay, for ADAA. For FMLA, which is the Family Medical Leave Act, that one is very prescriptive of who qualifies. So when Andrew goes into where you can create these policies in Mineral or find information, you will see in there that there are rules for FMLA. So for FMLA, your team member must have been employed with you for at least 12 months. So 1 year of service, and inside of that 12 months, they must have worked 1,250 hours. That is very prescriptive, okay? Just in case anybody's doing any quick math, 1,250 hours is not a full-time person. So they only have to work 1,250 hours in that year, okay? Now, there are rules about what hours count when you're doing that calculation. But and I believe most of you are probably calculating, or you will be calculating your time yourselves and not relying on a leave management service, but you need to calculate those hours. It's not 1,249 and a half. It's either you have 1,250 hours or you don't, right? If they don't, it disqualifies the FMLA. And this is where your other policy will come in. Do you have a personal leave policy? Do you have a non-FMLA medical leave of absence policy so they can go be out on another provision if they don't qualify for FMLA? Okay. However, if they do qualify for FMLA, then you move into the next step where you have to collect medical information to approve the leave to make sure it's a qualified leave of absence. So FMLA does not just cover every condition, but is a qualified medical condition. So one thing I want to caution you for when we're looking at these hours, and we might have to go into hours calculation in a second training, is that it is 12 months of work from the point where they're requesting it. It's not like you're looking at a calendar year. So as of today, have I worked for you for 12 months? Today is the day I've requested. And as of today, have I, or the date where my leave is going to begin, excuse me, will I have worked for 12 months as of the point where my leave begins? And will I have worked 1,250 hours? If the answer to that question is yes, that person qualifies for FMLA. I'm gonna pause. Cindy, any questions on that in the Q&A?
We've got just a few questions. If you want to reiterate the timing and how much time one receives for FMLA
Yes.
time off.
They get 12 weeks of FMLA. So let me just go straight there. Hold on. Yeah. So for FMLA, they get 12 weeks in a 1 year period. This seems like a short amount of time, but this could be a very long amount of time if somebody has an intermittent claim. But it's still 12 weeks. It has to only equal 12 weeks. They don't have to take that time on a continuous basis. So their leave could be, I need a leave of absence. The first 4 weeks are going to be continuous, and then I need the rest of the time to be intermittent as defined by my doctor. Now let's be cautious, everybody. When you go into the deeper training on this, it's not a free for all. It's not you automatically get 12 weeks no matter what. The approval of the 12 weeks is based on the medical information provided by the doctor. So the doctor will tell you how much time the person needs. The doctor will say if it's intermittent or continuous. And there are FMLA forms and paperwork that the doctor will need to return in order to get the FMLA approved. Now, here's what's important to remember. If I am Sally and I have been continuously late for work, and when I come in, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry I was late, I had a migraine. And oh, I'm sorry I'm late, I had a migraine. And I'm late, a couple times. That is automatically a key, a code for your supervisor, your shift leads, your whoever Sally's telling she's sick, that's a leader to give FMLA rights. You have to do that immediately. The person does not have to say, I need a leave of absence. Sally's always late. Sally says she has a migraine. That's an FMLA. Did you know you have the right to file for FMLA? Boom, immediately. Here's your FMLA rights. Once you give them their rights, you have satisfied your employer obligation. That is very important to remember. If Johnny is, was out for 3 days straight because Johnny had a procedure and he didn't tell you and he's still out, you need to give Johnny their FMLA rights. Bam, give them their rights. Now, if they apply for the leave or request the leave, that's up to them at that point. But your obligation as an employer is to give them their rights. Once you give them their rights, you've satisfied that piece. Now, if they apply for leave, once they apply, there are time limits that they have in place to give you documentation, to have the medical submitted. That's once they apply. And it's that medical information that's going to tell you how much time they get for the leave of absence, whether it's 2 weeks, whether it's 1 week, whether it's the whole 12, or whether it's intermittent. I'm taking care of my mother. My mother has chemotherapy appointments twice a week for 4 hours each time. So that means, my approval may be 2 times a week, 4 hours each time, up to 6 months, and that would equate to how I'm using my FMLA time. As you are tracking this time, keep in mind that 12 weeks is not per different medical incident. The 12 weeks is for the year in general. So if I've used up 6 weeks with my mother with chemo and now I'm having a baby, I only have 6 weeks left under FMLA. So it does count for that full 12-month period. It doesn't just refill every time they request a leave of absence. Okay. All right. I'm going to pause there for one moment. Cindy, any questions on that? Because that was a mouthful. And Kristen, I see your hand. Can you put your question in the Q&A?
Thanks, Glennis. Yeah, you answered a couple of questions. Several people had asked about that. One of the questions that I'm getting to is how long does it take to process and get approved for FMLA?
So processed and approved. From an employer standpoint, if you have a leave management vendor doing this for you, they should adhere to the guidelines of approval for FMLA. So it's normally within a few days after all the medical paperwork is received. I'm pausing because a team member they're supposed, if they know, so if you're having a pre-planned surgery, if you're pregnant, you're supposed to give advance notice of that as much as you can to your employer that you need that time off for that FMLA. Um, then there's a certain amount of time you have to return your medical paperwork back to be reviewed. And then once that's reviewed, it's normally like, a few days for the approval. Everyone on this call, if you are HR and you are the one approving the FMLA, you must do it as soon as you can. You cannot sit on somebody's FMLA once you have the medical paperwork in hand. Now, if the medical paperwork never comes, you can decline it. However, if the medical paperwork comes in late, you can actually reopen that FMLA and approve it based on the rules in place for approving FMLA when the paperwork is late and the claim has to be reopened. So that may have to be a separate leave training because I don't know if we're going to be able to unlock that today. But the short of the long is it depends on how long it takes you to turn in your paperwork if you get it done quickly or if your doctor kind of drags on within that timing. Any other questions, Cindy, on that?
I do have one question. If you are a new employer and you've been in business less than 12 months, are you still obligated to provide FMLA leave?
FMLA is not about the length of time that you've been in business. It's about the number of people that you have.
One more question, Glennis. This backs up a little bit about ADA. Are
Mhm.
they required to ask for accommodations during the interview process?
No, no, no. No, no, no. You cannot, under any circumstances, use disability, pregnancy, or anything related to leave as a part of your interview process. That is an automatic slap on the hand. Nor can you fail to hire someone because of something coming up under said rules. And remember, ADA is an accommodation, but if they've been hired less than a year, they won't qualify for the FMLA. So at that point, what other policies you have in place will be the ones that would apply to said individual who needs to be out of work.
And Glennis, one more person has a question regarding an employee who is calling out often due to anxiety. Would this be considered um, or be provided FMLA due to anxiety?
Yes, that will be considered a FMLA qualifying thing. Migraines are, anxiety is. There are several qualifying conditions. The doctor will need to submit documentation for that, and then you can track it. So here's the thing. If you are consistently tracking your FMLA, if you're getting the paperwork and you're adhering, so this person who has the anxiety, they will probably end up on an intermittent FMLA. That paperwork will come in. Eventually, it would exhaust, and then unless they don't have it frequently. But if it's frequently, it would exhaust. When team members know that they're being tracked and monitored for FMLA in this way, It does give them some comfort that their job is protected, but it also gives them some boundaries so they're not abusing the system and being out. Now, what's careful is you have to make sure you're adhering to it because if you're giving one person favor and one person not favor, then again, you're operating outside the bounds of your policy and it will cause issues for you. But yes, that would probably qualify under intermittent FMLA. They would need to, be given their rights and then get their doctors to fill out the paperwork and turn it into you for that.
Thank you, Glennis. I do have a couple of individuals asking about paperwork. Are they
There,
required to provide it written, or can it just be verbal to the employer or
Yeah,
employee?
no, it should not be verbal. So, there is medical certification. There are forms that are available. If you don't have forms, I believe Mineral has some forms on the portal, which I'm gonna let Andrew Pink chime in here in a moment, that you can download. If you don't have the right forms for FMLA, if you don't even know what to give somebody who applies for FMLA, I can send some out as well to you all. But there's a medical certification form that the doctor must fill out. And it's very specific, okay? It tells you the date the leave starts, the date the leave ends, how much time the person needs, how they take the leave, and you review it for that. And that's what the FMLA is approved based on the doctor, not on what the team member's telling you. And you need to get that on the form so it's consistent. These forms will not go to everyone. So all your leaders do have the obligation to give, here's your FMLA rights. But the paperwork for FMLA should come back to one person who's responsible for processing for your entity. So whether that is your HR person, your admin team, whoever does that, that one person should be getting that information because it's confidential information. It should not be going to everyone. It should go to that one person to review and sign off on the leave of absence based on the rules.
And Glennis,
Now,
who is responsible for keeping track of the time when someone is on FMLA? Is it
the,
the employer or the
the,
employee?
the employer, you will get the time that they have. If it's continuous, you will have that lump sum. If it's intermittent, the employee is required to submit their intermittent time to you. So, for example, I was out today all day for my migraine or whatever it is. Um, I'm going to come and say, I'm using my FMLA day today. Now, I say that loosely, but intermittent FMLA should be very prescriptive. So just because you get your leave says I get two occurrences per week up to 8 hours each time does not mean I get 16 hours. It means I get up to 16 hours. So if I call out on Tuesday for 2 hours and then on Wednesday for 8 hours, I have used up both my occurrences, even if I don't get to the whole 16 hours. So it is a very detailed documentation that comes from the doctor. And there are forms used for that we can supply to you.
And Glennis, those forms are through Mineral, correct? Because I do have a couple of questions about where they can find the form and is it provided by Mineral?
There are forms in the DOL website that you can use that are standardized. But I believe there are also forms in Mineral. So to that, we have 20 minutes. So we didn't even tip the iceberg today, everybody. I apologize that this is a big topic, so we will have to have a second training. But I'm gonna tip to Andrew really quickly so he can show you Mineral, and at least that will get you into some more information until we have part two. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, and Andrew, I'm going to punt to you.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Glynis. And hello, everyone. My name is Andrew, as Glynis mentioned. I'm the Partner Success Manager for GIOA over at Mineral. And today I'm here to kind of show you the Mineral system where you can find all of these resources and how things relate together. Glynis, just making sure. Can you see my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So I saw someone in the questions panel ask, or rather say that they did not know what Mineral was. So I'll just start with that. Mineral is a fully adept HR and compliance platform that's available to you as GIOA members. When you first log into Mineral, you will land at the dashboard here, and the login URL is apps.trustmineral.com. Once you sign in with your username and password, you will land at the dashboard. If there's any questions about access, those would best be directed towards your dedicated GIOA representative. So starting us off, you land on the dashboard, which is essentially the front page of your HR and compliance platform here. Now, the first thing that I'm going to point out is the toolbar is listed up top with all of your HR and compliance tools through the HR and compliance section, a company policy section for handbooks, any of our workplace safety and OSHA logs sections, our full LMS and training system, HR tools, templates where you'll find the forms, and I'll go over those in a bit. Any sort of resources, including videos and webinars, guides, and charts that are also related, our community and our help center. However, I also want to point out two other places real quick. One of those is down here on the right-hand corner is our Get Help button. This is present on every page of our website, and it's how you would contact our technical support team and also our HR experts who can be contacted for any HR and compliance queries. There's also a quick link to our help center, which has videos and documents that can be favorited. I also want to point out our admin icon in the upper right. This is where you're going to find your company settings right here. And it's very important to keep these company settings up to date, especially if you're a first timer logging into Mineral, or perhaps you just haven't used it in a while. I would suggest coming here first, admin company. And then you can find all of your company information. And it's important to keep your location information up to date, as well as this section here, number of employees at this location. So that would be the total number of employees at that location. If it's one singular location, then you can simply enter the number there. If you have multiple locations, then you would want to, from this screen, go to Add Location. And then you can add a separate location, adding in the number of employees at that location. If there's any questions as to how to structure that, if it's perhaps broken up any sort of different separate way, I would recommend directing those questions to our HR experts. And I'll go over what it looks like to contact them in just a moment.
And Andrew, why is this section very important for them to keep current?
It's important because the mineral intelligence system works based off of the information that you put in here. In other words, if you keep this section up to date, then you are going to receive the most up-to-date law alerts that are pertinent to you at the federal and state level. When you search for items on the mineral platform, you'll have a greater way to kind of filter for those results for items that are specific to you, i.e. forms that are specific to your company size, your location, etc. Essentially, Mineral is a living, breathing platform for HR and compliance, even down to the handbooks. When you create a handbook, the administrator who creates it can get notified when there are updates to those policies that need to be made. But all of the policies that are created for those handbooks, the law alerts that you receive, the to-do list items that you might receive on the platform, all of that are based on your company size, your location, your industry type. Mine is listed as transportation, but there's a drop down there. So it's important to keep all this information up to date, and I would do it regularly, at least monthly. So now that we've got our company information up to date, which, by the way, you always want to click Save Settings before you navigate away from this screen, I just want to highlight a couple of our flagship items. To get back to the dashboard, I can click the GIOA logo up here. You can contact the HR experts, as I mentioned, for any sort of HR and compliance queries. If it's related to ADAA, if it's related to FMLA, PWFA, these are great questions for our experts for how to structure your approach to these and to address any issues. So there's a couple different places where you can go to contact them. The first is simply down here on the dashboard. I scrolled down to find contact experts. There is a way to use the gear icon up top up here to make it so that those experts show up at the top, which is really nice. So I'll just do that. Now it's right there. This is the main portal through which you can submit the question, but you can always contact them down here on the right under Contact an HR Expert as well. They're available through this online form, which would submit a case, or you can call them. listed at this number here, 877-800-6675. And they're available over the phone Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. PT. The difference of submitting it online versus when you call is online, they will get back to you within one business day. If you call them, you would be speaking with a triage team. They would be essentially kind of intaking your information and your question so that they have a case that's created. And then you would have the option of having a callback for that response, or you could receive a response directly on the platform. I'll take you through real quick what it looks like to submit a question. I would select human resources for this question. I can choose, my company is based out of two different locations. You remember back on that company screen, there was an option to add more locations. So I added a second one. I'm based out of California for 80 employees and Oregon for 20 employees. I could say that this question pertains to all locations, or I could say, no, it's specific to maybe California. And I would click next. And then, simple as that, I get to ask my question or populate the issue. The field is very broad. I can enter in as much info as I want, and I can also attach files, which is really great if I have physical examples. I also get to double check my information over here. I have a kind of a goofy demo name, so don't mind that. But I see my company name, my own phone number, all of that information. And when I'm ready, I click submit. Essentially, the people who you speak to over the phone, if you call them, would be doing this same process. Either way, a case gets created. And where do those cases live? Up top, under the admin icon, My Cases, right here. This is where your HR expert cases and also your technical support cases both live. They're split into these two sections here. I don't have any cases submitted directly, but there's also an option to ask an expert here. So no matter where you are on the platform, if you have an HR and compliance question, maybe you're looking at a form for PWFA and you're like, I don't fully understand some aspect. You can grab that form, you can download it, you can go down to get help, contact an expert, and attach that form, for example. To move right along here, so yes, the mineral intelligence system essentially keeps track of those metrics that we put in earlier, our size, our location, our industry type, all of that. And it gives us law alerts and also different items that we can keep track of. If I go to the My Profile section, again, under the admin icon here, I can double check all of my information, my first name, last name, email address on Mineral. And down at the bottom, I'll also see an option for newsletters. Now, it's generally recommended that these are all checked on. I just don't have them on for the sake of my demo, but there is a question of the week, which is a best vetted question and answer session from our HR experts. It's just really great to see. A monthly What Matters newsletter highlighting the state of HR and compliance and any major state and federal legislative changes from the previous month. Any content that's created by our experts. There's a lot of good stuff in that one. Any product updates that we have coming on Mineral, and insights from Mineral Intelligence. This is based off of your usage of the platform. It's just a great newsletter to receive, giving you insights specifically for your company. But I want to highlight the law alerts here. For law alerts, as long as this box is checked on, you will automatically receive law alerts to your email inbox and on the platform, just any changes that are relevant to your state.
And Andrew, I'm just gonna chime in there is, everybody is super important to remember we're talking about federal laws and accommodations and leaves, but certain states have state laws and state leaves, like, DC has some, California, Hawaii, New Jersey, I think Washington State. But anyways, there are various states with specific leave laws, and by clicking that, you'll get the updates on those states. So just wanted to do a shout out for that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Glynis. And yes, I recommend checking those on just to make sure that you receive them. Um, Moving right along here, we also have a fully searchable HR and compliance library. It's available in several different places under the HR and compliance tab. There's many different subsections here, such as our backlog of existing laws, any law alerts that may be up and coming or current. We also have various tools available, such as a compliance dashboard, compliance insights, and compliance forecasting, which is actually our newest one. Before I jump into those, I just want to make it clear that it's very simple to go to this search bar right over here in the right part, and you can simply type in your query. So if I were to type in FMLA, for example, and hit enter, that's how I would search the HR and compliance library. Now, it's combing our library for everything. So as soon as I make this search, I want to make sure I go over to the left-hand side and apply filters. I want this to apply to California and Oregon because those are my states. Now, with that, I can also make sure that I set my employee count to a relevant size. Mine is about 100 employees, so I'm going to make sure that that's checked. And then I can give it a different category. For example, leaves and time off. And then content type, depending on what type of content I'm looking for. Am I looking for forms? Am I looking for checklists? Perhaps law alerts. So if I highlight forms here, now I'm looking at FMLA forms, any that are related to California and Oregon for my company size, relevant to my states. And I can always go back and change those filters if I need to. Then I
That
see
means
an F.
if you
Go
don't have
ahead.
any filters on, it'll just show you everything, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So you always want to make sure you use filters. And with that too, so I see one here, California Family and Medical Leave Designation Notice. If I find something that's like, ooh, that's really relevant, I want to make sure I keep track of that. Once you click into it, you'll see a number of options on the upper left generally, and I just recommend to favorite this. That way it's on your front dashboard. I can also print this, I can download it, and I can share the link. But since I favorited that, now I can go back to the dashboard by clicking GIOA again. And if I scroll down, to my favorites, this section right here, I can see that latest one that I favorited right there. We can see I favorited quite a lot. So I recommend really using this section to the best of your ability because you can favorite all items, forms, checklists, videos that you find on the platform, all of that. We can see I also had a California new hire toolkit that I favorited here. It's all really good information. So with that, I also just wanted to highlight a couple things kind of high level because I know we have a limited amount of time. Um, with the library, we have several items that are relevant to compliance over here, including the compliance dashboard, compliance insights, and forecasting. The dashboard will simply show you your number of employees. That's this line represented right here at the top with the number, and what applies to my company based on that. Since I have 100 employees, that line is far above all these ones. So that means that all of these apply to my company. And once you know, there's FMLA right there. If I wanted to get more details on it, just as a high level overview, I can click more details, and it will give me some action items that I can add to my to-do list if I really wanted to learn more about these and also make sure that I'm taking care of them, I can check them off, add to my to-do list, and then they will show up directly in the to-do list, which is in the dashboard and also on my admin icon, my to-do list. The purpose of it is meant to give you those action items. They're optional for you to add, but highly recommended. That's the whole purpose of the mineral intelligence system is it's going to just recommend these things to you because it's highly recommended to take care of them. But now that I have them on here, I can scroll through them. I can view what they are. If I click view, it'll take me to the to-do item and any relevant links. And when they're done, they'll be marked as completed. To move along with that too, we do have compliance insights, which is a different way of showing you different action items that you can take care of. So we can see that I have the PWFA one listed right here. And this is relevant to at least, it's saying a number of employees, at least 20. If I click view, it will take me to that insight and show me exactly what it is. And there's also any relevant links that will take me again here. On mineral, the way I like to think of it is because you might be seeing a lot, right? You might be seeing me scrolling through a lot. There's a link to a link to a link. So if there's any point at which you're lost, follow the links. There's always a way to get back and center to where you need to be. And the great thing is too, if for some reason you're not a fan of doing that, there are always the HR experts. You can always go down and contact them. So that's your lifeline. I really want to make sure that that's clear. Now, with that, again, the same searchable library is present here. Law alerts and laws you can search, you can apply the filters so they're relevant for your company and your company size. However, moving on to company policies, the next tab, we do have our handbooks, which is where you can create a fully compliant automatic handbook that gives you the notification when it's time to update your policies. So once I launch into here, we can see that I have a lot of handbooks created already. But to create a new handbook, and I'm not going to go through the full process right now, but we have a really great webinar in our webinar section on how to create a handbook. I'll just let you know. Create in the upper right-hand corner, new handbook. When in doubt on mineral, the action button is always on the upper right. So here I get to title my handbook. I'll just simply title it Demo Handbook 2026 for the sake of. The standard handbook comes with either federal only policies or federal plus one state. It's recommended to do the federal plus one state, so you get both. With that, you can upload your company logo. You can choose how you refer to your company and your employees. And then you can input who the head of the company is, head of company title, the primary contact, and how you refer to managers or supervisors. So the reason why we fill out these fields is because this is going to automatically generate a handbook for you that's based on those metrics that we talked about in the beginning, your company size, your location, your industry, all of that. That information, the reason why it's so important to keep up to date is because it's going to base it all off of that. And when it creates those policies, it's going to insert this text into those policies. It's going to say who the head of the company is, how do you refer to managers or supervisors, and it'll essentially shape it around that. Another good thing to be made aware of is that the email alerts are automatic. They're always checked on by default. If for some reason you didn't want them on, you could uncheck it, but it's really strongly recommended to keep them on. That way, the primary contact person, the person who's creating this handbook, me in this instance, will get notified whenever there's any of those updates. And what those updates look like, first I'll take a quick look into um, the table of contents. Here's a pre-existing handbook that I made. If I click on it, it'll take me to the table of contents where it shows the policies, the federal policies or core policies up top, and any state-specific policies listed below. This one was created for federal and California, so that's why it shows them as such. But each section has its own policies listed in it, and these are all automatically generated, again, based on your own metrics. Some of them would require any sort of customization, but with all of these, you can click into a policy and you can freely edit it.
And Andrew, before you get too deep down this hole, we have like 3 minutes left. Can you just show them real
Understood.
quick where the training material is so we can take last questions?
Definitely. Yes. And that's a great call out too. There's a lot on mineral. There is a lot. So I really also recommend our webinars section. I'm going to click on training in just a sec, but just be advised that under our webinars, on-demand platform training, you can find trainings on everything and more that I'm going through. And I especially recommend getting started in 30 minutes with mineral. And there's an even deeper dive of a 60-minute exploration, both of those. So those are strongly recommended. Again, that's resources, webinars, and on the on-demand platform training. To Glynis' point too, we have a training LMS, a full LMS course catalog here. So if I'm an administrator, I'm coming in, I need to upload my employees and make sure that they are taking training. You can do that through the training section under the dashboard. So this is where I would create and manage my tracks. Again, the action button being on the upper right to create a new track and assign employees to it and choose the courses. In choosing the courses, I want to point out a friendly option in our course catalog here. The course catalog breaks down into our different subsections, harassment, compliance and legal, etc. You can search for courses here. However, I really, really recommend the course selection guidance. I can't highlight this enough. And the reason why is because it allows you and your company to connect and request a meeting with an HR expert specifically to understand more about your training needs based on your location, your size, all of that. So really recommend this function, really recommend requesting a meeting so that your training is customized to your company. That's
So
another way that oh, go ahead.
So if you're having a leadership training, if you have some new um, directors or somebody, you can create training for FMLA, for ADA, for PWFA, USERA specifically, and assign it to them and require them to watch that as a sign-off certification for that new promotional role. That way, all of your leaders are always trained, and you can set that up at your discretion in Mineral.
Yes, and our webinars will go into how to create custom courses if you need to for upload. which is also available under the Actions Custom Courses Management, where you can go and you can upload your own courses. They have to be SCORM or AICC, I believe 1.2 or 1.3. But again, all this information is covered in those pre-recorded webinars too, um, and any future trainings that we'll share.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. It's 4 o'clock, and so I want to be mindful because I know operators and teams are busy. Um, I will schedule a part two, probably a part three for leave management since we did not get through everything today. Before we disconnect, Cindy, are there any other questions in the chat or in in the Q&A regarding the leave management that we did cover today?
There is a couple of questions, Glennis. I'm not sure if you're the right person to answer it. There's some questions about how to put it in their Chick-fil-A payroll system. Um, how do they keep track of their FMLA and their employees?
Okay, we will get that answered from Chick-fil-A. I don't know if you can track the leave in the Chick-fil-A system, but we'll find out. If not, we do have a couple of like manual tools that you can use to track on your own. If you are doing that manual tracking of the FMLA, you just want to make sure that you're doing that in a consistent manner.
Perfect. Thank you, Glennis. Couple of other things. Are there specific exceptions or accommodations in the restaurant industry? What do these look like since there is a lot of physical requirements for the job?
I don't quite fully understand that, but I'm guessing like they're speaking for an ADA accommodation or a PWFA accommodation.
Correct.
So it depends on what the medical actually says from the doctor. Like for example, if the person is doing the register and the doctor says they can't be on their feet outside of a 2 hour window, can they sit? Could you provide them a stool? Right? Like it would be
Mhm.
kind of that kind of a situation that you would have. If somebody, can't do something in the back, can they do something else instead of that? The doctor will tell you what the need is, whether it's they can't do, I don't know what they would be doing in the back fully, but let's say maybe they can't stand on their feet more than an hour, or they need a break every few hours, and you don't normally have documented breaks for that person. Can you give them a break every few hours so they're not standing on their feet in the back? So it will be based on that medical certification from the doctor, and then you would need to see if you can accommodate it. I will tell you with ADA, they are really liberal with that, meaning there's not much that you can't accommodate as an employer. Because unless it's somebody who's like some special neurosurgeon that it's only two in the whole country, and so you can't spare them, which that's not necessarily our industry. So they're normally reasonable requests to answer the question, Cindy.
Perfect. How about another question? You mentioned the 1,250 hours. Um, that's not full-time hours, but what about the employee? Do they have to be in the system full-time to be eligible, or is
No,
it related more to just the number of hours worked?
it's just the number of hours worked.
Okay, awesome. What about a team member who has not worked for the company for 12 months or the number of hours required, but they're showing up late due to health concerns? Can they still offer them FMLA rights, even though they will be denied due to short-term employment history, and
You
then
always
let them get denied?
Correct. You always offer the rights and then let the natural process happen if you don't qualify. And then if you have another policy in place that will qualify, that would be what the team member would need to apply for. But never let your supervisors or anybody else tell somebody they don't qualify for FMLA. All they have to do is give them the rights, and whoever the person is responsible for doing the FMLA approvals will make that determination.
Excellent advice. Here's one more. After satisfying our employer requirement of disclosing FMLA rights, how long do we have to wait before proceeding with disciplinary action? For example, if the employee never applies for FMLA.
If they've never applied, then as long as you've given them their rights and they don't apply, you can proceed. Now, there is a retro period where they can retro apply. So just be cautious of that. But yes, your obligations fulfilled once you give them their rights. If they never apply, then they have failed to apply, and then you can take your disciplinary action.
Excellent. And I have one more question about leave. What if an individual is on military leave? They come back, and for example, maybe a wife has a baby. Do they still required to maximum 12 weeks?
Military leave is not by 12 weeks. Leave is for the duration based on the orders. So you cannot request the orders to let somebody go out on military leave. The orders are normally submitted when they come back from military leave. So if the team member is on military leave and the wife has a baby while they're on military leave, it depends is the answer, right?
Okay.
So if the person's on military leave for 30 days, like less than 30 days, and the wife has a baby within that 30-day window, their benefits under you are still active. Once
Okay.
the person has been on leave for 31 days or more, then they would naturally transition to TRICARE, because that's a longer extingency. And then at that point, if the wife has the baby while they're on military leave greater than 31 days, then that's a TRICARE situation. If
Okay.
the person comes back from leave and the wife is pregnant, you're supposed to restore coverages and benefits and everything as if the person never left. So if the baby, let's say they come back from leave on March 30, I mean, excuse me, March 1st, and the baby's born March 15th, is going to be covered under the plan because you're restoring them as if they never left. So it does depend on how long the person is out.
What if the individual is on military leave, comes back, and then needs to take FMLA? Are they still eligible for 12 weeks in the same year, within the same year?
If they were on, there's an extension leave for military member, like if they got hurt on military leave, like while they're out on military leave.
This is a training for a person in the reserves. So they are actually in the reserves, they are in a training, and then they come back from military leave. Will they still be allowed to have 12 weeks off for their wife having a baby?
Ooh, you stumped me with that one. I will have to check the regulations on that. I would like to say, um, probably yes, depending on how long they were gone. I mean, a training doesn't normally last that long, so they probably would have still satisfied the 1 year, 1,250 hour requirement. So the answer to that question is probably going to be yes, but let me double check the regulations on that.
Excellent. We have just a couple of others. It says if a person hasn't met the hours requirement, is there any obligation to make the team member aware that they don't qualify? Once again, I think Glennis, you covered that, that you
Yes,
can still have them apply for FMLA and then get that rejection, correct?
correct. They would, now let's be clear. You are managing the FMLA process. So unless you have a leave administrator, you're going to take in the paperwork, do the calculation, and then give them the denial letter. So yes, they still need to apply. Yes, you would notify them they've been denied FMLA and any other options that they have once they have been denied FMLA.
Excellent. Thanks, Glennis. Just a couple of others. Um, I have a few asking where should they direct their employees to file for FMLA, ADA, that type of thing.
To your HR person in your store.
Excellent.
This is managed, either you have a leave vendor or you're managing it directly. in your store. So whoever your HR person is would be the one that I would, probably direct them to.
Excellent. Let's see, just a couple more. One person just wants clarification. Can someone technically call out once a month and still be within that 12-week threshold for FMLA?
Yes, depend. You mean like to qualify for the 1,000? Yeah, depending on how many
Yeah.
hours you work.
Well,
Yes,
I think they're saying what if they qualify for FMLA, but they just want to take a few days here and a few days there?
that is an intermittent FMLA that is
Okay.
allowed, but it's based on the medical doctor certification. It is not a loosey-goosey, they do whatever they want to do. The doctor will have to be very prescriptive to say, Glennis is allowed to take X number of days per month, per week, whatever, for however many hours for migraines. And then if that person's going to take that day, they have to turn in a timesheet to apply towards the FMLA. So it's not just a free for all.
Okay. Thank you. There's another one about specific forms. It says, do the person need to apply for FMLA first before giving the medical certification form, or should this form be given when we tell them about FMLA?
No, so you give them their initial rights first. They're going to apply for FMLA. And then once you make a determination if they qualify, then you will give them either a denial letter saying you do not qualify, here's what your next course of action is, or you give them, here's your medical certification we need from your doctor. And then at that point, they would take the forms to their doctor. And it's their responsibility to take the forms to the doctor, not yours.
Thank you. Question, another operator wants to know, should they share the FMLA rights with the entire team at the beginning of each year, or maybe when they're hired at orientation? They want to make sure that their employees understand their rights in the beginning.
I think if you just put the FMLA policy in your handbook, that should cover that piece of it. The rights notification is based on immediate right. So your obligation is based on when you see a need, you give it at that moment. You can't be blanketly covered at the top of the year, but it does not hurt that you have leave policies and that are in your handbook, so they have it right there when they're hired. So from that standpoint, you could do it that way.
Thank you. Does the 1,250 hours, Glennis, does it have to be with one employer at one restaurant?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Um, how about this one? If an operator pays a team member's health insurance premiums, does that continue during FMLA?
Ooh, this is a great question. I wish it would have came up earlier. We haven't gotten to that point in the presentation though. So, benefits while on leave are very important. If somebody is on FMLA, it depends on what your policy says. So you can be a generous employer and say, while you're on leave, your benefits will continue to be active for 12 weeks because you don't have to keep them active beyond the 12 weeks. And when you come back, well, I'll collect your missed premium. You can also legally require them to pay you premium for the benefits while they're on leave. So to pay their portion. And if they fail to pay, then you can terminate their benefits. Many operators can do this because it eliminates the burden on you to pay somebody's medical bill, and the benefits only stay active as long as they're paying. That is legally allowed under FMLA. So those benefits, it will depend on what you write in your leave policy, whether you require them to pay the premium while they're out to you or whether you collect it when they come back. But either way, under FMLA, they have to keep their benefits, but the rule is as long as they pay their premium. So again, if your policy is a little bit more generous and you pay it on their behalf and they pay you back, then you can do that. That is only applicable for medical, dental, and vision. Just want to be clear. You cannot pay premiums for short-term disability in life. The team member has to pay those in full themselves.
Thank you. And this is a similar question from Christina. So, if someone is having a baby or just needs time off for whatever reason, Do we have to get them to fill out the FMLA forms? Why not just give them unpaid time off?
Okay, so um legally, you're supposed to give somebody having their baby their FMLA rights and they can apply for leave. That protects their job. If you just give them time off, you can fire them, and that is not requiring you to return them to their same position, which is why we have FMLA. Because if you like Christina and you give her time off, and you don't like Janie and you don't give her time off and you fire her because she hasn't come back in 6 weeks, then you get into a discrimination issue. So giving them that time off is not giving them the job protection that's afforded under FMLA.
Okay. And can you reiterate about pregnancy and FMLA? I have a question about a team member having a baby. Do they fall under FMLA? Um, he says if a team member is having a baby but doesn't qualify for FMLA, what is a good standard policy for PWFA?
Yeah, so most employers do have additional pregnancy policies to cover people having babies who don't qualify under FMLA. And it's very similar to FMLA, but it's not the official job protection, but it gives them a qualified leave to be out on versus just being out. And it also gives those parameters of how long you're going to approve them for and when they have to come back. Most times for pregnancy, is 6 weeks for uh it's 6 and 8 weeks most times standardly, but if you're doing your own pregnancy non-FMLA policy, you can deviate from that. It's normally 6 weeks for vaginal, 8 weeks for cesarean, and then 4 weeks of baby bonding time after that. And you can create your policy for that specifically for people who don't qualify for FMLA.
Okay. Thank you, Glennis. We've got another one. Are we required to provide insurance and or payments or any other benefit during a team member's FMLA?
You are required to allow them to keep their benefits active while they're under FMLA. That is a legal requirement. You can't just terminate their benefits because they go out on FMLA leave. But you only have to keep them active for 12 weeks. And only if the team member is paying premiums for them or your policy allows for them to pay the premiums when they come back from leave. So again, that's going to be based on how you write your internal policies, but you do have to keep the benefits active.
Great. Speaking of internal policies, can an operator outline in a policy or notice or procedure to obtain FMA leave? For example, asking for at least 30 days prior to the start of FMLA leave or require them to fill out a form of some kind.
You can put those in there, but keep in mind prior notification for FMLA is only in situations where they can. It's not, you cannot hold them to that in every scenario. So if Judy gets hit by a car and she's in a coma, that's an unknown need. Somebody may have to file FMLA on her behalf, and you can't do a prior notification for that. So it's typically as soon as they reasonably can.
Thank you. How long should an operator allow someone to be out, not working with a mental health documentation, ADA? At what point does it become a hardship on the business?
ADA is not just a straight out. It depends on the medical certification. It could be an accommodation of 1 day off or 4 hours in a room with darkness. Like it's
Mhm.
gonna depend on what the doctor says, honestly, with that medical note. So that question is a little bit more complicated. Whoever asked that question, you may want to schedule some time with me directly.
And when you say ADA as a disability, can you be more specific about the disabilities? Is it an injury, workmanship, company injury, that type of thing?
It no, it should not be a workers' comp injury, although they can live together. People with workers' comp injury, like they get injured on the job, that will run through your workers' comp policy. So just kind of keep that in mind. But so let's say, I don't know, mm, let's say I have a temporary blindness in one of my eyes because I strained a nerve, and um that could be an accommodation that's straining my other eye. So maybe I need to like have a dark room for a couple hours or whatever. That's an ADA accommodation based on the medical documentation. It could be I normally stand outside during the intake of orders at the drive-through, but I can't be in the heat because the medication I take it requires me to stay cool or whatever. So maybe the accommodation is I come inside. I can't do the outside work today. I have to be inside for a period of time until I stop taking the medication. It could be anything like that. It's not normally things that are uber impossible. And typically they're not continuous. The only time you see them continuous is if, let's say, my FMLA, I don't have a full 12 weeks because I had something else happen, and maybe I just need 2 more weeks out. And that's where you would have that additional accommodation. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us today.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Okay. Any other questions in the chat, Cindy, before
Can
I?
you repeat, Glennis, just quickly about the process for employees applying? I got a couple more questions about where do they apply and how do they apply for FMLA?
Yes. So if you have somebody who manages your leave of absence for you, they would apply to that organization. They would do it on your behalf. I believe most operators are doing this themselves. So you're doing your self thing. If that's the case, you should have a designated person in human resources, a designated person who is responsible for processing the FMLA requests. So if I said team member need to apply for FMLA, I would, get the forms from Cindy. If Cindy is our designated HR person, I will fill out my request or email my request digitally to her. Cindy would make the determination based on my hours worked and how long I've been there. And if I qualify for FMLA, Cindy would, give me my medical forms and tell me to get those in within the time frame. I would turn those into my physician. My physician would send them to Cindy, who works in the operator store, and Cindy would approve the FMLA based on the guidelines on the medical certification. If I apply and I don't qualify, Cindy would send me a letter that says, you do not qualify for FMLA because you have not met the hours work requirement or you haven't had a 1 year service. And here are some other options that you have for your leave of absence. So that will be somebody in your store doing that for you.
And Glennis, one more time, what is the time between giving an employee their FMLA rights and you, as an employee, taking further action against them if they're not
Um,
working?
So what I would say is if you give somebody rights and you're not the HR person, let's say I'm a manager or a shift lead and I've given somebody FMLA rights because they're always late, I will report that to the human resource person and say, hey, Sherry's always late. I gave her FMLA rights, just so you know, because then the HR person will reach out to Sherry and say, hey, Sherry, you were giving your rights. Do you need to apply for a leave of absence? And then if Sherry doesn't apply for her leave of absence, there's normally a lapsed time in there. I believe I need to go look at it for sure. But it's normally a couple weeks because Sherry could retro apply. There have been cases where, let's say you take action and then somebody retro applies, but they're within the time frame of a retro approval. So that's why I said engage your HR before you take any action to make sure that that timing has been met by whoever in your store is responsible for tracking the FMLA. Because once you have done your due diligence, like Sherry, are you going to apply for FMLA? Here's your paperwork. Please do so to avoid, whatever. If Sherry doesn't apply, then you can take action. So but there is a rather lengthy time frame. I want to say it's like 3 weeks, but I'll get that answer for you.
And Glennis, do you have time for a couple of specific questions? We've got one operator who has someone who's had to take some unexpected time off due to knee injuries.
Okay.
The doctor continues to write them, I guess, excuses, but they did not get the FMLA set up. Does the operator contact them now and offer the FMLA?
I would do so.
Okay.
I would contact them. How long? Well, it depends on how long they've been out. If you have it retro apply, but most instances you can have it retro apply unless it's been going on for like 8 months, you know. So if the person just got injured, I mean, I would definitely give them their FMLA rights and ask them to apply for FMLA. You can apply it retrospectively to them. There is a time limit of how far back you can apply it to. And I believe the employee has to agree to apply it retrospectively too. But I will go ahead and get it moving so it's not a continual forever I'm out. An operator called us. Their team member was out on well, they weren't out on FMLA. They were supposed to be out on FMLA, but they didn't know they needed the FMLA policy and they were out and they've been out for 13 weeks and they enrolled in benefits, which nobody told us they were on leave. They're not supposed to enroll in benefits when they're on leave. But anyways, so they enrolled in benefits and she kept, pushing back coming out. Well, I helped them draft a letter that says, hey, we're going to terminate your benefits at this point because we only have to keep them active for this period of time. And if you do not return to work, they're going to end on this, in this month. And that brought her back to work. She came back to work on a partial release from her doctor. So yes, please start FMLA paperwork. It keeps them accountable.
And what about an employee that continues to submit doctor's notes that says that she can't be outside for with the temperatures under 50 degrees? Is there any advice there?
Intermittent FMLA.
Okay.
So have her
And
apply for FMLA and then it will be on an intermittent basis. And then if it goes beyond the FMLA timeframe, it might end up in an ADA accommodation. So
okay, and how about breastfeeding mothers? Do you have any advice there on what to do with employees that might be breastfeeding and need extra time?
meaning well, there's the PWFA will apply for that, right? So there's you normally would have a space where breastfeeding mothers can pump and dump or pump and in private, like a little area. But if you're talking about to come in late to work, is what I'm guessing
I'm guessing, yeah, possibly.
that will be based on your leave policy because breastfeeding is not normally covered under FMLA. So that would be under PWFA and your personal leave policy.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what exactly they were looking for, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. When you mentioned retro apply, can they do that after they are terminated?
Typically, no. The only time that becomes an issue is if an angry employee goes somewhere and says you never gave me my FMLA rights. So just keep good documentation. I gave you your rights on this day. You didn't file, and then you were terminated. As long as you keep your documentation, you're fine there. But they normally cannot retro apply after they've been terminated.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Um, Let me see if there's any more. We got a couple of more coming in at the end here. What about an employee with a doctor's note stating a neurological issue? Is that something we would need to submit to FMLA or ADA? It keeps them from performing duties, but not time off.
So it's not time off, then that would probably be an ADA accommodation that you would need to determine if you can accommodate.
Okay, excellent. Um, And then another individual suggested that breastfeeding mothers could look into the Federal Pump Act. I'm not sure.
I'm not
Um,
familiar with that one, but
okay.
I can send information on it afterwards.
Okay. And then I have a question about USERAA. I've been told that it also covers FEMA workers. Is that true?
USERA covers anybody who is female or male. Oh, you said FEMA.
FEMA. Uh-huh. Sorry.
FEMA. I don't believe it covers FEMA. It's just military armed services.
Okay. Excellent. Um, let's see. How about this is one, it says an FMLA website tracked some of the weeks that were used. Is employer tracking just for the operator purposes of making sure they're not taking more time than they should? Is that something you recommend?
You have to track it. It's necessary. It's not just making sure that they don't take more time than they should. It's also for you to make your determinations if they request a second leave. So, meaning, if I go out on leave today and I use 4 weeks and I need another leave in October, right?
Mm-hmm.
That 4 weeks count towards my leave in October. You're not necessarily making a new determination on my a new 12 weeks, right? Because it's in the same 12-month period. So that bucket could be used, that same bucket would still be used in October because it's just February, right? And so my leave bucket would run at this point from February 11th until February 10th of next year. So I can exhaust my leave at any time between that time frame from the first approval. The same thing is true is if I use all my 12 weeks up, let's say I've been on intermittent leave and I've been out and y'all are, I'm turning myself on time and there's a issue with my attendance or something and I'm right at the end of my 12-week window, my bucket expires the next day it could automatically refill, but you have to track it to know that because if you say you use all your bucket and you don't check when I refill and I reapply, then you can't, that's going to be an issue if you take disciplinary action against me, which by the way, you know, people can be savvy and know when their buckets are going to refill. That is a thing that happens. So just kind of keep that in mind. You should be tracking the hours used, the time off.
Thank you. We're slowing down, Glennis. One more question. It is in reference to the individual who is not allowed to be outside in cold temperatures. They want to know, should they start with FMLA for that employee, or should they just make it an ADA accommodation with the doctor's note?
If the team member is supposed to request the ADA accommodation, so just keep that in mind. You can't just be like, oh, you need ADA accommodation. But if they're sending you medical information, that could be their request for ADA accommodation. But FMLA is for time off specifically. So intermittent or continuous is not for accommodation.
Thank you. And then, Glennis, we have a couple who would like to know if this is going to be recorded and provided.
Is already recorded. It will be provided, and we will have a second session as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Glennis. That's it for the questions.
Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate your time. We know it's a busy time and we went over, but please look for a part 2 to our training. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.